If you're looking for a family-friendly museum with something for everybody, then I gotta put you on the Claremont Collections Automotive Museum. Claremont Collection houses over 300 rare and classic automobiles, everything from horseless carriages to modern muscle cars. Chicago's only automotive museum is open Wednesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And bonus, they got free parking. They also welcome school field trips. Now's the time to take advantage with 50% off annual memberships in February. Head to ClaremontCollections.com for tickets and get your discounted membership today. A Little Slice of Life is coming to Paramount Theater with the Chicago area premiere of Waitress, February 12th through March 30th. Now, in case you're not familiar with the Tony-nominated musical, here's what you gotta know. Waitress Jenna is on a mission to bake her way out of troubles, but can she find the secret recipe to her life? It's the kind of show that'll melt your heart during these cold winter days. Get your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com or call 630-896-6666. Use promo code CityCast for $5 off up to 4 tickets. Today on CityCast Chicago, the Justice Department is suing Chicago. Mayor Brandon Johnson is headed to testify in front of Congress. And if them first two stressed you out, I got plenty of events to help you relax this weekend. Helping me break it all down, the super duo from WTTW, state reporter Amanda Vinicky and City Hall reporter Heather Sharon. It's Friday, February 7th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Morning, my friends. Good morning, Amanda. Welcome back to the podcast.
You know I love being on with you, Jacoby. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I appreciate you always stopping through. And Heather, thank you for pulling up on us for the, I think, 25th time over the last 4 years.
I am always happy to make time for my friends over at CityCast.
Before we jump into looking back on some of the biggest stories of the week, first, I want to welcome all of the people listening today. If you're new to the podcast, please do us a favor and go back and listen to some of the episodes from this week. We started off by talking about why the entire city stays mad around property taxes. On Tuesday, we looked forward to some of the mayor's big 2025 goals. On Wednesday, we talked about last minute Valentine's Day reservations. And yesterday, we gave you some realistic tips for working out in the winter. But today, I've been thinking a lot about music this week. Obviously, we had the Grammys last weekend. We got the Super Bowl halftime show this weekend, which Kendrick Lamar, I imagine, is about to absolutely kill. But then tomorrow, 2 Chainz and Jeezy are coming in town to play at the Chicago Theater. And that got me thinking, if you all could have any 2 of your favorite artists play together at a Chicago venue, who would those artists be? Heather, I'm gonna start with you.
Okay, so you know that I've got to rep my Gen X cred always on this show. So it's got to be Chicago specific, right? So
it doesn't have to be. It could be any two people, but if it was Chicago specific, that's a bonus.
No. It has to be Chicago specific for me because that's how I roll.
Okay. My bad.
So I would love to see Pearl Jam or Eddie Vedder perform with Liz Phair, 2 of the seminal, 90s acts that have roots in Chicago. I think, we could also, bring Wilco out for, a special guest appearance. But this concert in my mind is Chicago supergroup designed for me personally. So I would appreciate anybody listening able to make this happen to get on it.
I love that. I love that lineup. Amanda, what about you?
Okay, so I would go to any concert. Let's just have me put it out there. I like to dance. I like a good time. So I will go to anything. But I feel like Chicago would, I don't know, set the world on fire if we could finally get T Swift and Bey together. Let's make that a thing, boost tourism for all time. We could do a residency sort of like Vegas does, and it would just change the trajectory of the city. The Bears could get their stadium, things, so could the Stars, the Fire, the Sox, room for everyone if we made this happen. But I guess personally, I would like to see, because like I said, I really like to dance. I want my concert would be, I want Killers and Kesha with a side of Survivor. And maybe like the Joffrey could come out and when I'm not like bounce jumping, the Joffrey could perform during breaks.
And y'all immediately laid out like a Pitchfork Final Day festival lineup. I was just going to say something like Shaka Khan and Mick Jenkins or something, or Achilles and Shaka Khan. And y'all was like, actually, I'm going to need Kesha, the Killers, the side of the Survivors. Can we get the Joffrey in there as well?
Shaka Khan can come too. That's cool.
I want to hear from our listeners. If you had a fantasy booking that you'd watch in Chicago, who would it be? Let us know by leaving us a text or a voicemail at 773-780-0246. Leave your name, your neighborhood, and your super duo. Every single Friday, we bring in these amazing voices from across the city to talk about some of the biggest stories happening in the city, to shine some light on some stories we think deserve some more attention. And we end every episode the exact same way, and that's with some good. I ain't even gonna finish it. Right before we hopped onto this call, we got word that the U.S. Department of Justice is suing Illinois and the city of Chicago, accusing us of standing in the way of the Trump administration's draconian immigration enforcement. And they want to see our sanctuary laws swept to the sidelines. Heather, can you jump in here and start us off? Is this a lawsuit that we saw coming? And you kind of break down what the implications are for the city.
I don't know that we saw this specific lawsuit coming, but if you're shocked or surprised, you haven't been paying attention, because it's clear that the president sees Chicago as sort of the exemplar of a sanctuary city. And he has long seen Chicago as shorthand for everything that ails urban America and all that entails. So it makes sense that he would train his power through the Justice Department on Chicago. But it's important to note that this lawsuit doesn't just name Chicago. It names Cook County, it names the state of Illinois, and it names both the governor and the mayor by name. So this is certainly an escalation of that sort of effort by the Trump administration to conduct what they've promised to be the largest mass deportation in American history. And I think that we should understand its connection to the fact that when a couple weeks ago, the federal government launched a series of raids designed to detain undocumented immigrants, Chicago responded forcefully, not just the city by sort of reaffirming its self-proclaimed status as a sanctuary city, and the city council voting overwhelmingly not to weaken those protections. But also you saw sort of a full force response by the city's community groups, educating people on how to respond to these agents, what their rights were, and what to do if they were detained. And we know that that had an impact, because border czar Tom Homan went on CNN and told Caitlin Collins that he was frustrated, that it had meant that they had not been able to detain as many people as they had planned to. So I think that this is an indication that these sanctuary city policies have been effective, and in their effectiveness have become an even greater target for the federal government.
Mm-hmm. I mean, during this time, we know that the Trump administration and law enforcement officials have already found ways to skirt around immigration laws, to apprehend individuals, to violate people's constitutional rights, to sweep up people who are here under a series of different forms of government authorization, temporary statuses, and people who are here, as we know, without a proper government authorization. Amanda, what is our state officials saying they're going to do in terms of maybe doubling down, putting more laws in the books, adding more protections beyond simply stating the things that we already have in place? Because as we're seeing, their effectiveness is maybe frustrating for the federal government in some ways, but they are already finding ways to get around our protections.
Well, so first of all, I want to spell out, and I think this is something that is important and instructive as now Illinois and Chicago face this legal action. What the Trust Act does, that is really at the basis of what the Trump administration is alleging, is this interference that prevents ICE and local police from working together. To a degree, it is that. It says that state and local law enforcement are going to be protecting the public. They say, regardless of who you are and regardless of your immigration status, that is their duty and their obligation. And so they're not going to, it's been do ICE's job for them. When there can be cooperation per these laws is when there is a federal criminal warrant. And so that's where you repeatedly hear the governor stressing, I think, in part, frankly, also because this is something that people are worried and concerned about, perhaps because they've heard the president of the United States talk about the fears and the scourge of undocumented immigrants ad nauseum, that if somebody is a violent criminal who has broken the law, if there is a federal criminal warrant, that then, yes, Illinois will cooperate. And that's really, I think, where the state is focusing right now. We have a reaction from the governor to this and saying that Illinois follows the law, pointing out that the Trust Act was, I'll add controversially, that is, signed into law by a Republican, and that is his predecessor, Bruce Rauner, somebody who Pritzker rarely, if never, has praised for, despite Rauner being responsible for a couple of laws that I think actually sort of put Illinois on guard for what has to come from the Trump administration. So that's really where we see the focus at this point, I think, is a public-facing, standing up for what Illinois policy and law currently is in the face of the Trump administration, and actually as well from frustrations from Illinois Republicans who are likewise constantly sounding what the alarm for what they say is too much spending and prioritization of undocumented immigrants versus the longtime Illinois residents or those who are here legally. So at this point, it's really that. I'm not sure that we've seen a whole lot of legislative action that is standing in starting to address Trump, especially when it comes to the immigration piece.
We also know that Mayor Brandon Johnson is going to head to Congress next month alongside a few other city mayors. Heather, what do we expect from this visit to Congress?
So it's a little bit unclear exactly what Johnson will be asked, but we do know that the Trump administration, through an executive order, is attempting to strip all federal funding from sanctuary cities like Chicago, Boston, New York, and Denver. And this, I believe, is part of an effort to sort of lay the legal groundwork for that legislation, potentially, or sort of the campaign. This lawsuit, I would imagine, could complicate those plans. Now, I haven't heard back from the city or the city's law department about what this lawsuit means, but I can tell you that, you know, in a normal course of business, lawyers are loath to let people named in federal lawsuits talk publicly about the subject of those lawsuits. So I am putting a big asterisk over sort of whether the mayor will appeal or will appear, I should say, or sort of what he will talk about. But if he does come and he does testify, I imagine that we're going to hear what we've heard all along, a fierce defense of Chicago's defense of immigrants as being good public policy, because these laws, I think, can be sort of used for partisan political purposes, but at the core, it's designed to make sure that undocumented immigrants are feel safe and are allowed to take advantage of the services to which they are entitled, regardless of their lack of legal status. And that means that they get to call the police without fear of being put on a list and deported, or going to a hospital when they need, emergency care, or going to a shelter if they're the victim of domestic violence, or, sending their kids to school because everybody is entitled to a public education. So the mayor has been forceful in those defenses. It is clear, though, that appearance is just sort of one part of this overall campaign by the Trump administration against efforts to protect undocumented immigrants.
This broad bucket of sanctuary cities being cut off from federal grants and federal funding, like what types of programs and initiatives and efforts could be blocked if that goes through?
There are lots of ways that a federal administration can tie the hands of states and, again, organizations and municipalities that depend on the federal government dollars going through. And so there is, I think, a long running discussion as we watch, of course, what the courts do. Right now, there is a temporary restraining order that says no, that the Trump administration can't hold up federal funding as it sorts out whether it meets the merits of Trump as he sees the world. Regardless of that, I think that there are many ways that states are going to have to be sort of fighting for prioritization, especially states and cities like Illinois and Chicago.
What's up, y'all? I got a couple quick questions for you. Have you ever wanted to learn how to make your own book plate? What about study the history of flamenco? Maybe take a writing workshop? Well, you can explore your curiosity at the Newberry Library by taking an adult education class this winter. The classes are led by experts and they're available online, if you're trying to learn in your pajamas, or in person if you're trying to go out, learn, and meet some new friends potentially. Adult education classes at the Newberry can help you jumpstart or elevate your learning. I got a couple more examples if you ain't convinced yet. You can reinterpret historical photographs of Native Americans, learn about the ins and outs of translation, and so much more about music, history, literature, and art. Adult education has been a tradition at the Newberry since the 1890s, so don't wait. Register now at newberry.org. Just click on Learn and Adult Education Classes to get started. Plus, enter promo code CityCast to get a 10% discount on your class. That's newberry.org, promo code CityCast. The Chicago women's soccer team has gone through so much in the last few years, stemming from a revelation that the team and league had ignored years of abuse, harassment, and mistreatment in the organization and across the league. Amanda, a landmark decision was reached earlier this week. Can you walk us through this years-long investigation as well as this decision?
Yeah. So unfortunately, of course, you have these allegations that were made by members of the then Red Stars. Now it's the
Chicago Stars FC.
Yes, FC. Under the Red Stars and under Coach Rory Dames, players alleged that there was all sorts of really inappropriate behavior going on, be it that the coach was texting them at all hours of the night, was requiring essentially them to go out to dinner or hang out with him. And if not, they could be punished by being pulled from games or benched or made to play with sort of the minor league team and practice squad instead of the professional one to which they were entitled and had made, that he would use racial slurs and be manipulative and demeaning to players who had wronged him. And so those were the sort of allegations that had gone reported, but nobody really did anything about. And in fact, when the U.S. Soccer Federation, which is above all of the football clubs in the United States, did pursue their own investigation, they didn't share any of that with the National Women's Soccer League. So this was behavior that was allowed to go on despite people in charge being made aware of it. And despite the players speaking out about it, to their own potential demise, really. And so we did have this break in both the Washington Post, and then there was a huge investigation. That is what led to the settlement that was announced on Wednesday that shares that there's going to be really a $5 million fund that players who were subject to this sort of harassment, not just from what is now the Stars, but from various other teams, they can file claims and be, in a sense, at least monetarily made whole. The settlement also calls for a couple of years of oversight from attorneys general, including Illinois. Kwame Raoul will be responsible for that, checking up every 6 months for a couple of years that some additional changes are followed, some of which have already been made. You already have some mental health counseling, player surveys, opportunities for players to share their concerns, not directly with their own soccer club team and ownership, but this is greater enforcement of it because it's, of course, a settlement and has the force of law. So that is what the members of the union that represents professional women's soccer players say they've already seen a difference being made as these changes have become part of the culture. And I'll add that while the Stars did not respond to requests for comments and questions about what this settlement means for them, after all of this came out, the then owner sold off the team, and now it is owned by a group of women investors led by Laura Ricketts, who said at the time of purchase that why she was interested in part in doing this was to make sure that the players got the treatment that they deserved and that there was a major shift in culture.
To read Amanda's full piece, we'll drop the link in the show notes. Before we head to good news, Heather, earlier we talked about Mayor Johnson going off to Congress, but I've also read a few stories in the last couple of weeks about potential ethics missteps at City Hall. And honestly, on first read, I didn't think they were like that big a deal, as much attention as they might have been getting. But can you please put these stories in context for me? What happened, and are they a big deal?
So I think you're right to be sort of skeptical about sort of what the meaning of all of these are. The first, of course, was the revelation by the city's inspector general that there's a gift room in the mayor's office where gifts his office is accepted on behalf of the city is stored. The inspector general was denied access at first to the log of those gifts and is still being denied access to the room itself. And there's some question about whether these gifts were properly sort of documented, as in we don't know who gave the city these. And some of them appear to be items of a purely personal nature, like size 14 shoes and a personalized pen. And it, on first blush, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for those to be the kind of gifts to be accepted on behalf of the city. Now, the mayor's office says that they're going to take a video of this room to show us all what it looks like and to do a better job documenting these gifts when they are accepted.
This room isn't new, correct? Like this, because you talk about following proper process. This means this has existed for longer than Johnson's administration.
Oh, it dates all the way back to the 1980s when, in some sort of unwritten agreement, the mayor's office was exempted from the overall city gift rules, which are that you can't take anything worth more than $50. And it's not clear if anybody has ever seen the gift room. Like, does the gift room have stuff dating back to 1990? I don't know. Maybe. I'd sure like to see. And I think it just raises questions about transparency and making sure that people are not using their political office for personal benefit. And that's, I think, important in a city like Chicago, which has such a long and sordid history of corruption.
But as of now, we don't have a sense that Mayor Johnson has done anything different than previous administrations, and that, like you said, there aren't size shoes that fit the last 4 or 5 mayors.
We don't know. We don't know. And my issue is that we should know, because if these gifts were accepted on behalf of the city, city residents own them, and they should be able to get a look at their stuff.
Are we even sure, by the way, that Mayor Johnson is size 14? Or I don't know if these shoes were made for him or if that has been made clear. And I think that's part of the issue, to your point, Heather, is that perhaps the cover-up is worse than the crime in this situation. The mayor says that he has not seen this room himself, but because the inspector general wasn't allowed in because, frankly, now we're getting a video instead of people really having access.
When you start giving a runaround, it begs more questions than if you would have just said, go in there. Sorry, we just throw stuff in there. And if you go in there, there's some M&Ms that's been in there for 25 years.
At what point does this closet get a clean out? And is it auctioned off? I think it raises a lot of questions, but it's not surprising that mayors are going to receive gifts, be it cookies or some sort of ceremonial, I don't know, paperweight. Sure, that happens and that's normal. And that does not necessarily mean that things are going awry or that there is, a conflict of interest or a tit for tat or a gift and thanks for. But it's a matter of transparency and making sure that people are acting on the up and up.
Heather, what was the other incident that is gaining some traction right now?
Well, it appears that the city clerk's office took down a video of a committee hearing at the mayor's office request because that recording captured audio conversation between two people before the meeting started. And I wrote about there on Wednesday, and it is not clear to me why this was such a big deal because it's just basically two people pointing out different older people and talking about the various people who are always at city council meetings. And, it is confusing to me that a video of a very contentious hearing, this was about the artwork at the cultural center that's drawn a lot of controversy, would be taken off of a public website, removed from public view for a matter of hours because somebody was in their feelings about this conversation being captured when they didn't think they were speaking loud enough to be captured by a microphone. So I think it's almost in the same sort of universe, right? Because city officials, and I am not unbiased on this point, of course, have an obligation to do their work in public. And if they are taking step to sort of obscure that or prevent the public from witnessing and keeping tabs on that work, I think we have an obligation as journalists to ask, hey, what's that about? Now, City Clerk Ana Valencia said that it was inappropriate that her office agreed to the mayor's office request to take down the video. She ordered the video be restored, and the video is online now for everybody and their mother to see. It's honestly, like I said, not salacious or really all that interesting. And as you said, sometimes it's not the crime, but the cover-up. And I think Richard Nixon says, didn't we learn this lesson about 50 some odd years ago? So...
We end every single episode of CityCast Chicago the same way, and that's with some good news. Amanda, we're going to start with you. What's your good news for us today?
This isn't really a story. This is like a personal thing, but my good news
we
is...
allow everything. It could be a bowl of soup you ate. It could be you not busting your ass on the ice this week.
Eating.
It could be anything. Go ahead.
It's usually about eating, Jacoby. And so it is again. But I am thrilled that Restaurant Week is still on. And credit to all of the chefs and servers and bartenders that are dealing with what I believe to be a lot of crowds. And that's a great thing for Chicago and for my belly. So I have taken not full advantage, not as full advantage of these restaurant deals as I wanted to, but I've got a couple good ones in there. And have another coming up this weekend. And let me just say that I am pumped about it. And if anybody wants to dine out, you let me know. I'm doing Anelia.
Ooh.
Yeah, it seems real cool. I am pumped about it. I pass by it on my way home from work when I don't take the highway. And this is a Ukrainian restaurant that is some pretty renowned chefs, like Michelin star level business. So I'll let you know after I give it a try.
Anelia is up in Avondale. Anytime somebody names a restaurant, I immediately got to pull up to see what's in the menu. What's in the menu?
Yeah, I don't really know Ukrainian food that well.
Braised chicken and chanterelle mushrooms. Ooh, huckleberry, bacon, pecan, praline. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's sort of innovative. I will say that I live near Ukrainian Village, and there are some great places to try Ukrainian food there. That's one of the great perks of Chicago, right? Is that we have sort of every cuisine that you could possibly dream up, and all sorts of neighborhoods that really bring those ethnic roots out in culinary, fashion, and otherwise. But here's a fancy version. So I will let you know, like I said, Jacoby, after I've drank and eaten everything on the menu.
Heather, over to you. What is your good news for us today?
So I know that I often come on this show with the tale of a cute critter who's been rescued or otherwise saved. And we've got one of those. There was a snowy owl that was saved out at O'Hare after being injured and is now being rehabilitated. But I got to tell you, this month has been hard to see the good news. And so I am struggling. I know I'm not the only one struggling in that. And I would say that the last couple of weeks have reminded me a little bit of the start of the pandemic, where it seemed like it was awful and it was terrifying, but it was nevertheless clarifying as you got to see sort of what people were about and sort of how they were responding to sort of a real sort of challenge, for lack of a better term. It's tough, and it's especially even tougher when I had to walk like a crazed penguin to get my kids to school this morning because of the ice storm out there.
Hey, we appreciate both of y'all for making time. Every week in some regard has its tough stories. But like you said, this past month has been especially hard trying to consume the news, trying to make sense of it for the rest of us. So we really appreciate y'all.
Trying to keep up with it, Jacoby. I mean, that's part of it too. And can I get a quick shout out that while it humors me, and I'm glad that Heather and her children made it safely, you are supposed to walk like a penguin when it's icy. There is a reason that penguins walk the way they do. I had a great slip and fall, broke my wrist on ice once upon a time. It stunk. And so now I do everything I can to prevent a repeat, because I got to be able to type, let me tell you. And so Heather did right. That was the appropriate instinct. Follow her lead, everybody. Walk like a penguin. Doesn't matter if you look foolish. Start a trend.
Get the water on. I'm going to finish us out today with a couple of weekend events people can look forward to, starting with the 7th Annual Cultural Jam at Amundsen Park in Austin from 1 to 5 tonight. You can enjoy a quilt show, craft fair. They're going to have food, dancing, and more. Also tonight from 6 to 8, if you really want to double up the fun, Bridgeport Records is getting their Detroit techno on tonight with DJ Steve Tang in the building. And then Stand on the Record Store vibes, which has really been my energy all month. There's going to be a pop-up record store this Saturday at Subterranean in Wicker Park. Sub T is partnering with Val's Holler Records during the afternoon. And so that's just another event for you to go. You can shop their crates, listen to some live music, have a drink. I'll drop links to all of these events in our show notes. But before we get out of here, please join me in thanking our guest today from WTTW, Heather Cherone. Heather, I appreciate you being back.
I'm so glad to be here.
And state reporter Amanda Vinicky. Amanda, good to have you here.
Same. Thank you so much.
Before we get out of here, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody who makes this podcast and newsletter possible. Our executive producer is Simone Alisea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago newsletter editor is Ava Wanowski. Our roving newsletter editor this week is Adrian Gonzalez. Our roving producer is Elizabeth Kama. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. Hey, if you enjoy the podcast, we appreciate you. Share us with your friends and family. Rate and review the show wherever you listen. Make sure you subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. And the last thing, be back here bright and early on Monday. As you know, we are the 4-time best podcast in the city, as voted by the city during the Chicago Readers Best of Chicago 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. But the only way we keep doing what we do is if you keep showing up. So we'll talk to you soon. Peace.